Hi everyone, I am Mr. Aldali Shenabasappa. Welcome you all for today's session. In this session, we will have a discussion regarding the arc heating. So, arc heating, there are different types of arc heating we need to discuss here. So, before looking into that, let's understand the concept of this arc heating. So, here we can understand what actually the arc heating is and how this arc heating has been developed, means how the heating is developed using arc. So first of all, you can look into this picture here. If an electrode, if I use two electrodes, in between those two electrodes there will be a air gap. So you can observe it here, there is an air gap. This air is a dielectric medium, but it will act as a dielectric media until and unless it reaches its certain breakdown voltage. So generally the dielectric strength of air is of 21.1 kilovolt per centimeter. It means unless and until it reaches this 21.1 thousand volt, 21.1 kilovolt per centimeter, it will act as a dielectric. Once the voltage applied is more than this, then it will behave like a conductor. So the gap air what we have in between these two electrodes will become conducting. It will start conducting, and when it start conducting, there will be flow of current. So because of that flow of current, we get this kind of a spark. Okay, this we call it as an arc. So there is an arc between two electrodes because of the flow of current in the air gap, and this current, this arc will develop the heat. The surrounding environment will get heated up. So this heating because of the arc is called as an arc heating. I hope this is very clear how the arc has been developed, and because of that arc heat has been obtained. This process is called arc heating. Now let's see some of the important features of this arc heating. As I already mentioned it, the dielectric strength of the air will be 21.1 kilovolt per centimeter. If you want to develop the voltage, means if you want to get this kind much of a high voltage, we need to use a step-up transformer. We use step-up transformer to get this voltage, and the temperature which can be obtained using the arc heating is in the range of 3000 degrees Celsius to 3500 degrees Celsius. Okay, and the electrodes which we use, the type of electrodes used are carbon and or it may be a graphite. So these are the two types of electrodes used for a arc heating. So in this video I just mentioned you that there is a development of a arc bit in the gap, means we had a gap here, and to get this, to achieve this, we need to apply very high voltage, that is in the range of this. So it should be more than this. So you should apply very high voltage. But is it possible to develop an arc in low voltage? So that will be a question now. Yes, the answer is yes. Arc can also be obtained at low voltage, but one small change is the electrodes must be initially in contact. Initially both the electrodes should be in contact, and there must be a flow of current in it. So when there is a flow of current in electrodes and those two electrodes are in contact, and now we will just separate them. When we separate them together gradually, then there will be a gap between the electrodes, and already there is a flow of current in the two electrodes, so there will be a chance of having a current flow in the air. So that create an arc. So suddenly we won't break down, we won't get that breakdown. When we remove that two connected electrodes together gradually, there will be flow of current in between, there will be flow of current in the air. So that creates an arc. So even at low voltage we can get it, but the condition is initially those two electrodes should be in contact. If you go for high voltage, this is what happens in high voltage. There is no need of having contact of those two. There should be a gap, and in that gap itself we get a arc. So this is about how we can develop the arc. Arc furnaces are usually of in two types. Either it will be in cylindrical type or conical type. So cylindrical type and conical type, comparatively when we compare these two, conical type will have some better advantages than the cylindrical type of furnaces. So because of those advantages, the arc furnaces are of majorly made of conical type. So the advantages are listed below. This type of conical type of an arc furnace will have very large surface compared to the cylindrical type. Means the large surface means that is the area per unit volume of the bath. Bath is nothing but that is the charge which is to be heated here, and it consumes very less power and smaller melting time. Because of that conical shape, the melting of the metal will be very faster, and radiation losses will also be less. So these are just few advantages of conical type, because of which the arc furnaces are designed in the shape of conical, right. So now let's have some construction details of the arc furnace. Generally, arc furnace will be made up like this. It is going to have a refractory lining material. This is we can say this is side wall. This is also a side wall. This is the bottom wall where we have the charge which is to be heated here. So bottom wall should be very refining, means it should be refined. Refractory material used here should be very highly efficient one. That's what we need to use. And whereas this is the topmost, or we can say it as a roof wall. So side wall, roof wall, bottom wall, three types of walls we get. And there is a chance of means we need to pour, we need to give the charge, we need to pour the charge. This is the charge which is to be heated, right. So we need to pour that charge into the furnace. For that we will have a door. So slag means we can remove or we can pour it. So through this door we can do it. We can pour the charge. If it is of a large one, then we will pour it like using a side door. If it is a smaller or medium furnace, then we can have a top door at the top of this. So you can have door here. And this is just a purified steel, means we can take out the steel out of it. So here we are pouring it here and we are taking it out here. So you can just have an input and output. That's what we can understand here. We need to get this after melting of this metal. We need to get it out of it. So we can use this portion for that. So if we want to take it out, we need to tilt it. We need to tilt this furnace. We need to tilt this furnace like this. So to tilt that, we will have some mechanism here. So this furnace will be placed on a foundation, and that foundation will have some mechanism so that it will tilt this, and the charge will come out of it. Okay, this is the just a picture of it. Let's have in detail points about the construction. So here we can see there are walls. As I told, there are walls which are lined, and these walls are lined is nothing but refractory material will be used, so that the heat should not come out of that furnace. It should reflect the heat back to the furnace, right. So these are lined with the bricks or magnesite bricks and silica bricks. Bottom walls will be lined with magnesite mix or a ground ganister mix, depending upon the what type of a basic lining we require. Are we requiring a basic lining or a acidic lining? If it is a basic lining, then we go for a magnesite mix. If you want acidic lining means that material should not get chemically reacted with the charge. If you want that kind of a lining, then we go for a ground ganister mix. So this is about the lining of a refractory material, bottom walls and the side and roof walls. Next we have a door, as I told you. For pouring of the charge, we want a door and a tap. There should be a door and a tap hole through which we can pour the charge into it, and after melting we will take out the charge from it, right. So that is about the door what we have here. The size of charging doors and tap holes must be smaller, because if it is a larger size, then the heat will be liberated through that also. There will be heat loss. To reduce that heat loss, we will go for a smaller size of a door and a tap holes. As I already told you, the furnaces has to be placed on a platform. That platform can which can be tilted, means that means we will have a tilting portion. We should have a mechanism of tilting the furnace, so which can be tilted for pouring out the molten metal. So largest furnaces are equipped with a side door, as I already told you. Here you can look into this picture. We have side door here. So largest furnaces will have a side door for charging, and medium and small furnaces will have a top door for charging. Now let's look up into the important topic, that is the type of electrodes. Here I have mentioned 3 electrodes, right. It's a 3-phase, means RYB, or if it's a single phase, you can use just 2 electrodes. And here the name is given as graphite. So there are different types of electrodes which can be used in the arc furnace. Now let's have a look over the types of electrodes used in the arc furnace. There are 3 most commonly used electrodes in arc furnaces. They are as listed here: the carbon electrode, graphite electrode, and self-baking electrode. So let's have in detail about this one by one. So before this, I just want to make it very clear, among these 3, how we are going to select any one of it. So there must be some points which is to be considered while before selecting the electrode. So the selection of a particular type of electrodes are made on their some important points. So here I have mentioned those points. First point is the electrical conductivity. So what should be the conductivity? It depends upon the application. If you want to have a very high current, then we should go for very high conductivity material, that is the graphite, like that. Okay. Next point is insolubility. Insolubility means the electrode must be insoluble. Insolubility should be very high. So what actually it means? It is nothing but the material should be highly opposing or difficult to dissolve in liquid. It should not get dissolved in the liquid. Liquid is nothing but here the charged metal. So the metal, molten metal will be there. So with that molten metal, it should not dissolve. It should not get dissolved. That is called insolubility. Next point is infusibility. So it's nothing but difficult of being melted or dissolved in the charge. So when temperature increases, it should not get melted easily. That is called infusibility, right? So the electrode should have a very high fusibility or infusibility property, so that it should not get melted easily. Then chemical inertness, it should be very strong chemically, that will come in contact with the air, and also the electrodes are coming in contact with the charge, so it should not get any chemical reactions there. That is called chemically stable or chemical inertness. Then mechanically it should be strong, the stiffness should be there, ductility should be there. Resistance to thermal shock means there will be a heat. Thermal means the temperature, heat will be there. That should not affect the resistance, or that should not affect the electrode. So a resistance in the sense it should oppose the shock of thermal. Okay, variation of heat or variation of the temperature should not affect the electrode. So that is what called as known as a resistance to thermal shock. And also the selection depends upon the size, what size of a furnace we are using, what type of a furnace we are using, whether we are going for a large size, medium size. Based on that, we will select the type of electrodes. So these are some of the major points which are considered before selecting the type of electrode. So now let's have a look over the types, individual electrodes, that is carbon electrode, graphite and self-baking. Let's understand the details about that. So carbon electrodes are generally made of anthracite coal and a coke, right? Anthracite coal and coke. So these are the materials used for developing the carbon electrodes, and they are for low cost compared to the graphite. Carbon electrodes will be of low cost. Almost the cost of carbon electrodes will be half of the cost of graphite electrodes. So if you are using 100 rupees for graphite, then 50 rupees for carbon. That is how we can compare. So 50% off of, almost off of the graphite electrode. So this will also give one more advantage here. As I know that the cost is less, hence what we can do here is, for the same cost, larger sized carbon electrodes can be used. Okay, as I know that we are saving the cost. Instead of using graphite, if I go for carbon, I can go for double size, larger size. I can increase the size, and when I increase the size, the result of that will be uniform heating. Heating will be distributed uniformly. So this will be an advantage of going for a carbon electrode. Similarly, let us understand what are these important points of graphite and self-baking electrodes. Graphite electrodes are obtained by heating carbon electrodes to a very high temperature. As it mentioned, high temperature in the sense 2300 degrees Celsius to 3000 degrees Celsius. When we heat up the carbon electrodes to very high temperature, then we can obtain the graphite electrodes over there. We have some of the advantages of graphite electrodes. So let's have a look over there. Its conductivity is 4 times greater than that of carbon. So conductivity is great in the sense the output heat production will be very high. Hence the size of the graphite electrodes which we use here will be of smaller size compared to the carbon electrodes, right? So we have one more advantage here. Graphite oxidizes at 600 degrees Celsius. Oxidizes means there is a chance of getting chemically reacted if the temperature is above the 600 degree Celsius, but carbon is going to oxidize at 400 degrees Celsius itself. So compared to the carbon, this is also the better option. Graphite is going to oxidize at 600 degrees Celsius, which is slightly better than the carbon. We have one disadvantage, that is the cost. It is costlier than carbon, and we can say that it is almost double the cost of carbon electrodes, right? So this is about the just a few points regarding the carbon electrodes. Let's move on to the one more type of electrode, that is the self-baking electrode. So here we can look over there. So self-baking electrode is nothing but it is made up of a special paste, and that combination of a paste or a composition of a paste is totally depends upon what type of a process for which it is used, right? So we are heating it for, we are using this electrode to heat what kind of metal. Based on that, the paste will be decided, right? So this paste is going to be placed in a steel cylinder. So this is the steel cylinder, and in this cylinder we will have a paste, and the current is made to flow through that paste. When current flows through the paste, it will be heated up and bakes, and that will be made into electrode. Okay, the paste will get heated up and bakes the paste into electrode. So this is how the self-baking electrode can be developed. So the paste is totally depends upon the type of process for which it is used. So these are the just construction details of the furnaces. Till now we have discussed only the construction details, what are the types of electrodes, what are the types of walls we use. Okay, so now let's move on the actual types of arc furnaces which are used for arc heating, right? Let's move on for the next slide. Now let us look over the types of arc furnace. There are three types of arc furnaces available, that is the direct arc furnace, indirect arc furnace, and submerged arc furnace. So let's have a look over the direct arc furnace. Direct arc furnace is as shown in the figure here. Here I have shown two electrodes. So this is a single phase direct arc furnace. We can also have a three phase direct arc furnace. The only difference between the single phase and three phase is we will have three electrodes if we go for a three phase direct arc furnace. One for R, one for Y, and one for B terminals. It will be connected like that. Now let's see what are the important terms we need to understand here. In this type of furnace, the arc, you can look at here, this is the arc. The arc is formed between the electrode and the charge which is to be melted or which is to be heated out, right? So the transformer will be there, and from the transformer we will give the supply to the electrodes. Phase one terminal is connected to one electrode, the other terminal is connected to the another electrode, and when current flows through the electrode, there will be a charge, there will be a flow of current in the electrode. Because of that, there is a provision of a arc will be provided, and that arc is in contact with the charge. So it is called direct arc furnace, right? So the arc will come in contact with the charge, and that charge get heated up, and when arc is coming in contact with the charge, the current will also flow through the charge. So this is going to create a electromagnetic waves in the charge. Because of that electromagnetic field, there will be a automatic stirring, means the charge will get stirring out over there, stirring effect, because of which uniform heat will be distributed here. So that's an advantage we have, and the voltage what we apply here will be in the range of 40 to 145 volt. We apply less voltage, but we get very high current here, and this can be achieved by having a transformer. And the type of electrode what we use here will be a carbon or a graphite. Any of these will be used based on the charge required, heat required, right? And also there is a outer frame, that is a chamber. This chamber, this is an outer frame, this is the chamber, and the inner frame of the chamber will be made up of a refractory lining. As I already told, we need to have a refractory lining here, and the material used for this refractory lining is depends upon the type of charge, right? So now this refractory lining will just protect, means the heat will just reflect back the heat towards the chamber, so that the heat can be utilized efficiently, right? This is the important terms what we need to understand regarding the direct arc furnace. The size of furnace is of 5 to 10 tons, means this is the capacity. It can be used up to 5 to 10 tons, and it is used for melting and refining of steel. Generally, most generally it is used for melting of steel. Okay, now let's have some important points regarding the direct arc furnace. So these are few more points which is the most important thing which you need to understand. That is, the product obtained is very pure, and its composition can be easily controlled during the refining process. So whatever the output we are getting, the molten metal what we are getting out of it, right, that will be pure. Its power factor is high, that is almost 0.8, and the power required, operating power required is 200 kilowatt, high power is required, and the energy consumption is 1000 kilowatt hour per ton. to melt the 1 ton of charge, you need to get 1000 kilowatt hour, right? So but only one drawback is initial and operating cost is more. Even we can say the energy consumption is also more here, and initial and operating cost is also more. So these are some of the important points about the direct arc furnace. Now let's move on for the indirect arc furnace, that is the second type of an arc furnace. The indirect arc furnace this is how it looks. It's going to consist of electrodes. Two electrodes will be there, and the arc between these two electrodes will be developed. There is a metal here, so the arc is developed just above the metal. So let's have a detail about that. It is in a cylindrical shape. It means the furnace is cylindrical in shape, and it is made up of a steel. So this body is made up of a steel. The frame is made up of a steel with a refractory lining inside the furnace. The arc is formed between the two electrodes as shown here above the charge. It is above the charge. The arc is not directly in contact with the metal which is to be heated. So it is called indirect. The heat is transferred through radiation. That is the point is mentioned here. The heat is transferred through radiation to the metal. That's why it is called indirect arc furnace. So as it is heat is transferred through radiation, the temperature produced is less than the heat which was developed in the direct arc furnace. There we got a conduction and radiation both, but here we have only through radiation. Heat is transferred to metal through radiation. So the heat developed will be less compared to the direct arc furnace, right? As the current does not flow through the charge. That's the point. See, one more point we have here, one more thing you need to understand. The current is not flowing through the metal or a charge. So as there is no flow of current in the metal, there is no automatic steering is possible. So there is no automatic steering. So there is not possible of having a automatic steering action, right? So that means we need to, if we want to have an uniform heating, we need to provide some mechanical roller system. So that's the reason here we have two rollers. Mechanical roller system has to be provided. So rollers are provided. Those rollers are going to used for rocking of this mechanical system. Rocking in the sense, it's just make it move up and down. It will be moving like this, right? So that it will be twisting at certain angle, right? So that will just make up this metal, and uniformly heat will be distributed. The electrodes are projected through the chamber horizontally. So these are placed horizontally, and there is thorough mixing of the charge due to rocking action, as we all know that. Due to this, what happens here is the molten metal, when rocking happens here, the metal comes in contact with the refractory line, and it will also absorb the heat which is absorbed by the refractory lining. So that we will get two advantages here. Heat is also carried through, transferred through conduction also, because refractory elements will carrying the heat, and that heat is absorbed by the metal. And how it possible? When we do the rocking effect here, right? So that is slightly increases the temperature of the metal, and also it will increase the life of the lining which is used over there. That is one advantage. And we can see here only two electrodes are available, and the mechanism, the system is provided is here only for two electrodes. So it is limited for single phase, only single phase. It cannot be used for three phase, right? So initially the electrodes are in contact. So what happens here? Initially these two will be in contact, and current will just apply the supply, will give the supply here for this and this terminal. So current will flow through the electrodes, and will slightly remove that from the contact. Means it is we will just withdraw the contact of these two electrodes. There will be a gap. The gap will be provided in between these two, and in that gap there will be a flow of current, because of which we get the arc, and that arc will provide a heat for the metal. That is how it's work. It is going to work. Now let's see some of the advantages. Before looking into advantages, this is one more point you need to understand. At starting, the rocking system of the mechanism is of angle 15 to 20 degree. So this will be just moving 15 to 20 degree from right to left. Okay. Then once melting starts, that rocking system will increase to 200 degree, so that uniformity of heat can be transferred, right? Heat transfer can be in a uniform system. So the advantages are it's low cost, economical, because melting is taking place completely in a closed chamber. We don't have door or nothing else, right? It is completely, we will have small holes to pour the charge, but generally it is a complete closed chamber, so the loss will be less. That's why you can say that economical, right? And also labor charges are also less here. Quality casting, next advantage is quality casting is nothing but due to that rocking action, thorough mixing of the charge takes place, right? As the it's completely means the mixing will be done clearly, as there are no combustion of gases produced. The product is free from blow holes. There is we are mixing it, so there will be no chances of having a holes in the product, in the metal, so we get a pure quality of output. Then we can say the single furnace can be used at low or high temperature. It's a can be used at low as well as high temperature with slight changes. We use it generally for low frequencies. It is used at low frequencies, and it is used for a melting of non-ferrous metals. So these are applications and advantages. Let's have some more few more points, important points regarding the indirect arc furnace. Here we can see the some more important points. Capacity means the capacity of this chamber will be 0.25 to 3 tons. It's slightly lesser than the direct furnace, and the power factor of this furnace will be about 0.85. The energy consumption is all about depends upon the type of metal what we use over there. If you are using a brass, if we want to melt the brass, then the energy consumption will be 275 kilowatt hour per ton if you want to melt the brass. If you are using bronze, per unit the unit energy consumption will be 325 kilowatt hour per ton. So it's going to change with respect to the type of metal what we use. So this is about the indirect arc furnace. I hope it is clear for you. Submerged arc furnace is the third type of an arc furnace. This is as similar as the direct arc furnace. The only difference here is the electrodes are submerged into the metal. The rest of the thing is going to remain same as similar to the direct arc furnace. So I hope you can just compare it with the direct arc furnace. The only thing what you need to change over there is the electrodes are immersed in the metal. Rest of the things are going to be remain same. So that's why we are not going to give much importance for the submerged arc furnace. I hope this is very clear for you, all the content what we have explained here. If so, just like the video and share among your friends. Thank you.